everybody, I'm Elizabeth Hines from ourpaleofamily.com, and today I wanted to share with you a really simple recipe that is going to make your family really happy. What I have for you today is a Paleo Pizza Crust, and this pizza crust is nice and crispy. You can pick it up and eat it with your hands if you have people in your house who like to eat pizza with their hands. I guess I'm strange. I like to cut my pizza because I like to keep my hands clean, but it holds up to lots of toppings. We put a lot of vegetables on our pizza typically, which are kind of wet, and it holds up to that just fine. It reheats really well in the oven. I wouldn't use the microwave because it'll be soft, but if you put your pizza in the oven, it'll heat up in about 10 minutes and be nice and crispy. And this crust has a great flavor. I think you're really gonna love it, and I just want to show you how easy it is. I think a lot of people think if they're going to cook healthy that means it's going to be hard, and it's not hard. A lot of times it's even simpler than regular cooking. So I have all my ingredients and tools out, and I just want to show you how quick it is to put this pizza together. Okay, this is a really simple method. You're going to mix up your dry ingredients, and then you're going to mix up your wet ingredients, and then you're going to mix them together, and then you're going to spread out your dough. So we're going to start with our dry ingredients, and I need 2 cups of almond flour. I keep my almond flour in the freezer because it's just ground up almonds and nuts, and seeds will go rancid. So I go and I buy it in bulk, and it's cheaper that way, and then I have it on hand when I need it. So because it's been frozen, it's going to have some lumps in it. It wouldn't normally have clumps, but it does clump together a bit in the freezer, and it'll stick to my measuring cup. So I just want to make sure I scrape all that out. So I just have a little fine sieve or sifter here, and it'll go through really quickly. Just kind of shake it back and forth, and it'll shake out. Then we'll end up with these lumps at the end, and don't throw those out, just press them. They're just stuck together like, wet sand at the beach, and you can pick it up and crumble it. I don't know why, my kids love to do that. So then just press it through. You can use your fingers, you can use a spatula. And there might be, a large piece of almond in there that's not going to go through, and that's fine. But I've never had that happen. I just suppose it could happen. Okay, so we'll set that aside, and I'll set my almond flour aside. My next dry ingredient is 1/2 cup of arrowroot. This is kind of not a secret because I'm giving you the recipes, but my preferred flour combination for paleo baking. Just about any kind of baking. Cookies, cakes, my pie crust. You can do all almond flour, and that's great if you want to keep it really low carb. You can do just the almond flour. This is golden flax meal, which is a flax seed, and again, it's a seed, so it will go rancid unless you're using it up really fast. I don't use it particularly fast, so I keep this one in my fridge. You could keep it in the freezer too. So I've got 1/4 cup of that. This recipe is on my website, ourpaleofamily.com. So if you don't catch all the measurements here, don't worry, you can look it up. What was I saying? Oh, if you want to keep lower carb, you can leave out the arrowroot, which is a starch. So it obviously brings some carbohydrates to the game. However, it will change the texture a little bit. You'll need to adjust your liquids just a little bit. But it'll still work. It'll still work just fine. Okay, so then we need a teaspoon of baking soda. I forgot to get that out. Excuse me. This recipe came about because, well, let me give you a little history. We love pizza. I think most people love pizza. And just because we started eating paleo did not mean that we were going to stop eating pizza. Now I'm going to add a teaspoon of dried oregano. And so I have made pizza with cauliflower crust, and I have made pizza with a meat crust and a sweet potato crust, and they're all good and they're all different. I even have, recently I published my gluten-free flour blend recipe on the website. I'm not a huge fan of that because it's rice flour, it's potato flour. It's just a lot of starches that we don't want to eat on a regular basis. They are still pretty refined, but I found that I was having to send my kids with baked goods to different functions, and they had to be nut-free. So I couldn't use my standard almond flour. So I didn't want to use gluten-free flour from the store because they have gums and other additives in them that I didn't want. So I made it my own. So I have published that flour recipe for you, and I'm in the process of putting out recipes that I make with that flour. And one of them is a pizza crust, and it has yeast in it. It has a great flavor, and my kids love it. But again, I didn't feel great about it because of the rice flour and the potato flour. So I went searching for a paleo crust recipe. Let me keep working here. So I put in my oregano. I'm going to put in some cream of tartar and some garlic powder. And there's a brand, which I'm not going to name, but you can find them online. You can find them in health food stores. And they have a lot of mixes that are almond flour based. So I don't think they say that they're paleo because they have some other things in them, but they have a pizza crust mix, and I'd heard that it was good, and so I was looking at it, and I just used their ingredient list, which obviously doesn't give amounts or anything, but I used their ingredient list as a base and then played around with it and made up my own crust. And I like this one because number one, it tastes good, and number two, it's easy, and it uses all ingredients that I have in my kitchen at almost all times. So that meets my criteria. Everybody loved it. It had the flax meal gives a really nice sort of nutty taste, and you know, almond flour is a nut obviously, but I don't think it makes baked goods taste nutty at all. It's very, very mild. That's my oven. I turned my oven on to 425 because we're going to par bake this crust, which means we're going to bake it for a few minutes before we put any toppings on. And so now I'm going to mix up my wet, which is, whoops, 1 egg. In case you're wondering, I am fancy today because I have a lunch date with my husband. My kids are at camp, and so about once a year when they're at camp, I get to go have lunch with my hubby, which is a real treat. So we have an egg. This is a 1.5 tablespoons measure, so I'll do 2 of those for 3 tablespoons of olive oil. You could use another oil. You could use avocado oil. Coconut oil, you know, tends to solidify, and I just don't like the taste of it very much, frankly, in something like this. So I would probably not use coconut oil, but you go for it if that's what you like. You could use MCT oil, which is a coconut derivative, but it doesn't have the coconut flavor at all. So we have some apple cider vinegar, and then a couple tablespoons of water. And give that a little mix. So this is like a quick bread method. You mix your dry, you mix your wet, and then you put them together. Just beat this up really well so the egg white gets all mixed up. I'm sorry, there's a hair tickling my nose. So just stir this together. And because there's no yeast, you don't have to let it rest, you don't have to let it rise. You can just get right on with making your pizza. In this video, I'm not going to show you sauce. I'm not going to show you toppings. You can do that on your own. In my write-up for this recipe, I do give you the guidelines for the sauce that I make, although it's not my recipe. It's in a book by Jen Hatmaker, actually, called 7, An Experimental Mutiny Against Excess. That's the name of the book. It's great. She wrote it, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago. And it's not a cookbook at all, but she does include her recipe for pizza sauce. And she says something like, it'll change your life, everybody will love you. And it really is very simple, and it is the best pizza sauce. that I have ever made. So that's the one I use. So I kind of outline it for you in my crust recipe. So it is together. It's a little bit wet. I can touch it. It's not sticking to my hands. Okay. It's a nice crust. It smells really good because of that garlic. So I have my half sheet pan, and I'm going to line it with foil today. Sometimes I use parchment, sometimes I use nonstick foil. I'm just in a nonstick foil kind of mood today. So I'm going to drizzle olive oil all over my foil. It's not going to stick. The crust isn't going to stick because it's nonstick foil. But this will give it additional flavor, help it get nice and crispy. And so I just kind of plop my crust down randomly all over my pan. Now we are more of a thin and crispy crust family. If you like your crust thicker, then by all means, don't roll it out quite as thinly as I do. But if you roll it out nice and thin, or press it out thin, then it will cover this whole pan. And you have a nice big pizza that will feed a crowd. And for my crowd of 4, you know what, I think I forgot to put the salt in my crust. Let me look at it. Oh, there's actually not salt in the recipe. I got out my salt because there's always salt, right? But there wasn't in this one. So this is a real cute little non-stick rolling pin that came from a craft store because actually it was designed to roll out fondant, which is that sort of marshmallowy stuff you cover cakes with. I took a cake decorating class when my firstborn was a baby. And so I've always made my kids kind of fun character birthday cakes. And this little rolling pin is great for rolling out that very non-paleo fondant stuff that they just love. But it also comes in handy. I couldn't get my big rolling pin in this pan. And this one works really well. And the fact that it's non-stick is really nice. It's not 100% foolproof on the non-stick factor. But it does a pretty good job. So I'm just going to keep working this until I get it pressed out, covering the whole pan. So I'll use a combination of my fingers and the rolling pin. I like the rolling pin because it does get it even, and it can make parts of it go a little bit faster. But with the rolling pin, you don't get a sense of how thick it is. When you get your fingers in there, you can tell that, you know, this section is kind of thick, and this section over here is a little too thin. So I really like to get my hands in there. I'll finish with my fingers. I can feel it and make sure it's an even thickness all over. Okay, there we go. I wish you could smell it. So I'm gonna take my fork. This is actually like a cooking fork. I would use this to turn meat in the skillet, that sort of thing. And it has sharper tines. So I'm gonna poke holes all over my pizza, because if not, it's going to get really puffy, and I don't want it to get puffy. So you can see, I showed you, my crust is sort of brown. It's not white. I didn't use white flour. I used almond flour, which is a little yellow, and then the flax meal, which is pretty brown. It's making my crust darker in color. So you're going to have to look at it, pay attention, because you want to bake it now until it just starts to brown. So put him in the oven for about 8 to 10 minutes. Okay, and then I'll show it to you when it comes out of the oven. Okay, before we dive into the next recipe, I want to show you my pizza crust par baked. And I'm sure you'll notice that it is darker brown on this end than it is on this end, and that just means it's a little thicker here and it's a little thinner here. And that's totally okay. It's not going to continue to brown on the top. It'll brown a little bit on the bottom because we're going to cover it with sauce and delicious toppings. But you know, I told you it was crispy and you could pick it up and eat it with your fingers. You could actually pick up and eat the whole thing. But you wouldn't do that, right? So it is nice and crispy, and even when we put the toppings on, it'll stay crispy. And this crust tastes really good. It's nutty from the almonds and the flaxseed. It has great flavor from our garlic and oregano that we added in. You could add all sorts of flavorings to your crust, whatever you like, or you could add none. If you have somebody in your house who might say, "Look, I don't like that flavor," totally adjust it and just keep the basics the same. And I think you'll really love it. Thanks so much, everybody. And again, you can find this recipe. It's called Paleo Pizza Crust, very simple, at ourpaleofamily.com. Thanks.